no car. Car's here. Time for the build breakdown. Let's go over the car, what's done to it, and why I did it. So, first thing we're going to go over, which is probably what everyone wants to know, we're going to go over the engine package, power package. We've got a stock block. It's got 135,000 kilometers on it. So I guess that's not too bad. We've got a GT3071R that is externally gated. I've got the ATP externally gated hot side. So the turbo's right, the wastegate's right off the hot side. Tile 38mm wastegate with a little dump tube. It is externally dumped, so when the wastegate opens, it sounds amazing. Maybe I'll insert a clip or something here so you can hear it. But yeah, so the GT30, it's a little older by today's standards, but I got a really good price on it, and it was kind of good timing when I bought the car. The old owner had the turbo, and he was like, you know, I was going to install it, but now I'm selling you the car, so if you want, I can install it for you as part of the package. He owned a shop. He was the shop owner, so for him it was easy. He just had his tech do it, and they did it. So that's the turbo. In terms of my intercooler, it is a custom built kit that I had done locally. It utilizes a Mishimoto J-line intercooler, which you cannot see because it's behind my massive oil cooler, but it cost me $1,500. The reason I went custom is because to order even the Cobb kit, which is what I was planning to order, the landed cost in Canada was close to $2,000. It was like $1,900 and change, which is ridiculous for an intercooler. Like that's, you got to be crazy. So $1,500, I saved myself almost $500 having it done locally. It's been on the car for 4 years now. No issues. So there's my intercooler kit. Nothing fancy there. Since we're still in the front end, the engine bay, we've got the HTP 3.5-inch intake, which I also sourced locally. Cost me $350. It was brand new. The filter's kind of dirty and tired now, so I'll have to give that thing a clean. But anyways, HTP, pretty common on these cars. Nothing crazy there. Cobb 3-port boost controller, also kind of a common mod. If you notice here, I sleeved this one wastegate line with DEI heat sleeve. 2 years ago, that line actually cracked on me, and I was driving with a broken line, and the car was making boost extremely quickly and all of the boost. So that was fun to drive, but obviously terrifying for a stock motor. So I've heat sleeved that, and it's been on there for 2 years now, and it's been fine. And I do inspect it every year. So once the motor comes out, that'll probably get all either redone with hard line, which is something that me and my friend have been talking about doing, or I'll just put on a new vac line in there, sleeve it, and good to go. In terms of bypass valve, we've got the Turbo Smart Compact. So it's a very simple, very basic. It's a push type valve, meaning it actuates, it opens by the boosts in the charge pipe, pushing on the piston on the bottom. So when you lift off the throttle, this doesn't see boost, it sees vacuum. And then the boost in the charge pipe pushes up on the piston, allowing it to bypass the boost back into your intake there. So that's the bypass valve. The reason I had to use that specific valve is because I needed a push type valve to work with my failsafe. I've got an Innovate PSB1 failsafe on this car, which will trigger from overboost condition or from a lean condition. I've had lean conditions on track before, and it's terrifying. And I've had it happen twice. I had my fuel, what is it called? The fuel pressure valve fail, whatever it is. That stupid valve that fails, and then you lose all your fuel pressure. So that sucked, and that was terrifying. And then I had another condition where I think it was just I was low on fuel and it was starving, and it was leaning out, kind of exiting corners. And again, when you're driving on the track, you're focusing on driving, so you're not really looking at the gauges, especially when you're trying to pilot this thing out of a corner. So after that, I said enough is enough. We're putting the failsafe in. No more messing around with that. So that covers the failsafe. Let's move on here. Factory heat shield, which every single person throws in the garbage, and that's terrible. Do not throw that heat shield out. You must be dumb if you think that that's a good idea. You know how much heat is generated by the turbo under here? I had the ATP internal wastegate hot side. That's what came with the turbo. I actually cracked that housing. The wastegate was cracked, and a couple of the bolt holes were cracked and leaking. And that is purely due to heat. That is from driving the car on track, doing 50 watt pulls in a session, whereas in Mexico you do 1 watt pull and there goes, oh, I did my 4th gear pull, we're fine. On the track you're doing 50 4th gear pulls, every corner 3rd to 4th wide open, all down 4th, you're reeling it out. So you're making way more heat on the track than you're ever gonna make on the street, and that's a promise. So I kept the OEM heat shield. Every time I took it off to do any work, I always put it back. It keeps you from cooking couplers, keeps you from cooking your charge pipe, keeps you from cooking literally everything else under the engine bay. The car now currently has the Cobb 3-inch downpipe with the cat still in it, and that goes to a 3-inch turbo back that was custom built in this shop. It's got one huge muffler on the back, but it's a straight through muffler, and yes, straight through mufflers do not restrict flow like people think. If the inlet and the outlet on your muffler are on the same side, it's a straight through, you're not impeding airflow whatsoever. On the outside of that, you've got all your packing, which quiets the noise, but other than that, it's not a problem. So the car has one bullet style resonator right under the middle, and then it's got the big MagnaFlow muffler in the rear here, and I'll see if we can maybe sneak the camera under there. But yeah, there you go, there's your muffler. So that's the exhaust setup, 3-inch Cobb downpipe, the cat's still in it, to a 3-inch cat back that was custom built here. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the oil cooling package in the car. That's kind of one of those mods that nobody really needs to do ever on any car, unless you're racing it, or if it's a big truck like this and you're using it to tow, you know, thousands of pounds of stuff, you're going to want all kinds of coolers. But on these guys, the engine oil temperatures that I've observed, they're quite high, even just putting around the street. When I had no oil cooler, just a sandwich plate with the sensors in there, I was regularly seeing oil temperatures around 250. Most modern engine oils are good up until about 300 Fahrenheit, and then they're kind of pretty much out of their efficiency, and you're just breaking down the oil, you're killing it. When you track a car as heavily as I track this thing, my oil temps were constantly at 300, constantly, and that's where the sensor stops reading my oil temp sensor. So the true temperature, I have no idea. But either way, ever since installing the set trap, so I've got a set trap 34 row, and I'll put the model number on the screen, cost me about $440 Canadian for the core. And then I used some Dash 10 nylon hose here from Vibrant, so that's my line. I think I bought 20 feet of that stuff. It's kind of expensive. It was around $160. The sandwich plate from Setrap is around 120 bucks, and then they sell another plate to put your sensors into, which is kind of stupid. I wish it was all one unit, but that was another 50 bucks. And then all your AN fittings. This whole oil cooler setup, the oil cooler itself, the hoses, the fittings, it's around $1,200 to do it yourself. I had a friend recently do a similar setup on his Neon, and he was around $1,050, $1,100. He bought a smaller core, so he saved $100 there. But yeah, so that's the oil cooler setup. Oil temps on this thing are insane. With the big oil cooler now, driving on the highway just in 6th gear cruising, even though I have a thermostat in the sandwich plate, oil temperatures still, they hover at like 150, 160, like way too cold to be beating on. But when you start getting into stop and go, or you go out to the back roads and you start doing pulls, temperature will get up to around 180, 190, which is where you want your oil temp, and it'll live there. On the track, the highest I've seen is 250 with this setup, and that was with the old bumper, which cut about half of the oil cooler, so it wasn't even using all of the surface area there to dissipate heat. And that was 250 is what I saw. It was 40 degrees Celsius, I think, was the temperature that day. It was stupid hot. And this thing is no problem. It's such a big oil cooler for this engine that it's no problem. The idea is going to be to move it behind the intercooler when we do the redesign, because it's ruining my boost temperatures where it's currently at, and that sucks. The way my tune is built on this car is once boost air temps exceed 55 Celsius, which apparently is kind of low, it starts reducing wastegate duty, and it'll start reducing timing. It'll pull power out. And when I was having the car tuned, that was a big thing for me. I was telling the tuner, hey, stock bottom end, I'm going to be tracking the hell out of this thing. I need it to survive. So it's on a pretty conservative pump gas tune, 12 degrees of timing at the top, 22 pounds of boost, nothing crazy. It's got a very gnarly reverse taper to help keep the rods intact. The car was tuned by Nissan back in 2017 or 2018. He doesn't do e-tunes anymore, I think, is what I heard. Not 100%, don't quote me on that. But anyways, been very happy with his tune. It was fantastic. But yeah, so that's the front end. I guess we can cover the grille. The idea behind the grille for me was simply to introduce more airflow, to expose more front surface area on all these heat exchangers. So what we're going to end up having to do, I think anyways, is we're going to trim that part of the crash bar. We're going to trim that part of the crash bar. We're going to move the oil cooler behind the intercooler. We're going to raise the intercooler up, and we're going to build some ducting pretty much right to the bumper. So the duct is going to start somewhere here and just go straight back. Same thing on the other side, all the way to the radiator. And the idea is to give the air nowhere to go but straight through the heat exchangers, and eventually the hood scoop's going to get replaced with a vent, and it'll exhaust the heat out that way. So this is more of a track inspired, track focused mod. Pretty much nobody needs this ever unless you're tracking the car. And even if you're going once, twice a year, you really don't need a cooling setup like this. If you're going 5, 6, 7, 10 plus times a year, you want to invest in an oil cooler setup like this. It's not cheap, but it's well worth it. Okay, next piece of this car is going to be the brake setup. So I have got the StopTech ST40, so the calipers, they're 4-pot ST40 big brake kit caliper, 332 millimeter rotors, 2-piece rotors. They are very light given the size. I think if we were to convert it, it's about 13.1 or 13.2 inches. The stock Mazdaspeed 3 rotors are about 12.8 inches. So these are a little bit bigger. It doesn't sound like much, but it is in brake world. So the brake kit's fantastic. I love the StopTechs. The OEM calipers on these cars can take you pretty far. I had G-Lock R12 pads, which it's an aggressive race pad, but you can drive it on the street, which is what I wanted. And they were actually doing quite well in the OEM calipers when I had my RS4 tires, which is what I raced on. The problem started coming when I switched to RE71s, so still a 200 tread wear tire, but as some of you might know, the RE71s are more of a cheater tire. They're probably closer to 100 tread wear. And with all that extra grip, I was overpowering the OEM brakes. I was getting mushy pedal after, 1 or 2 laps. And that totally kills driver confidence. It makes you not even want to do any more laps. And recovery time was also terrible. I would pull the car off, let it sit for 15-20 minutes, and pedal would still be soft. And that's not really ideal. Now, if I was running like a 300 tread wear tire, Firehawk Indy, or even those RS4s, and you're going maybe 3-4 times a year and you're doing back road cruising, the OEM brakes on these cars are more than enough. They're more than enough. With a good pad in there, you're fine. The only reason I went to the StopTechs is because the car gets primarily driven at the track. It goes on the back roads quite often, but it's mainly driven on the track and with sticky tires. So for me, the brake kit was absolutely necessary. There are other brands who do it for cheaper. This cost me $2,700 after tax for the StopTech kit. That includes both the rotors, calipers, includes some decent pads, stainless steel lines, and an amazing instruction book. That's very well done considering how big of the company StopTech is. Why I went with StopTech over some of the other brands, and yes, I know there's brands that do big brakes and it's half the price. A lot of those companies, they offer a 4-pot caliper that looks pretty, and most people want pretty things. They don't care how well it works or does not work. They just like the fact that it looks nice. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. You know, bigger calipers, it's going to be better. It's going to take more heat, sure. But if you're using the stock size rotor, you're not really doing a whole ton for the overall braking of the car. That's the first thing I want to mention. Second thing is going to be tires. 99% of people putting big brake kits on their car are either running all seasons or they're running, you know, a summer performance tire that's going to be a 300 tread wear and up tire. And if you're getting into ABS, your brakes are overpowering your tires. What's the point of that? Like, that's absolutely crazy. If you're getting into ABS, you're not going to stop any faster. If your OEM brakes can get you into ABS, you're fine. The issue I had with the RE71s on this car is that I could not get ABS. Like, you smash on the brakes and there's just too much grip, and the brakes just, they didn't know what to do. The heat would just go straight into the OEM caliper, cook the fluid, and I'd have to bleed the fluid every single freaking day. So that's all I want to talk about on the brake setup. Maybe I'll do another video diving into it deeper, because there's so much, I don't want to say bad information, but there's so much misinformation when it comes to brakes on these Mazdaspeed cars and any car in general. But anyways, StopTech big brake kit, I love it. It was expensive, but it's honestly like a dream for me. I've always wanted the StopTech big brake kit, and when I could actually justify it because my driving and the rest of the setup on the car suited it, I pulled the trigger and I did them. I've got custom brake ducts. So as you can see here, it's a plastic funnel that was 3D printed by a friend of mine, and you can see the orange brake duct hose in there, and that runs to a plate that is behind the rotor, and the outlet on the plate goes right into the center of the rotor where all the vanes are, the vines, whatever, for cooling. So the idea is the fresh air would go straight to the center of the rotor, the wheel spinning, and the air is going to cool the whole entire rotor down, which will cool your brake pads down, which will cool your caliper down, and cools everything down. So I installed those when I still had the stock brakes, and it alleviated a lot of my issue with the overheating and the mushy pedal. What it didn't do, and it's simply because we don't have enough friction, is it didn't help with running with the stickier tires. I still did not have enough brake. I mean, I could jump on the pedal as hard as I wanted to, and like ABS couldn't do anything. There was too much tire. So yeah, the StopTechs are amazing. If I could do it again, I would, and I would only ever buy StopTech. We'll talk about that in another video. But that's the brake package. G-Lock R12 pads are in there. I've tracked it twice with the StopTech street pads, and in the manual it says if you're going to be going to the racetrack, put some better pads in. While those StopTech street pads, they don't have the initial bite or the torque of something like a G-Lock R12, but they did very well with my cooling ducts, with the big brake setup. I didn't really fry them as hard as I thought I would. I overheated them after a few laps, but like I said, or maybe I haven't said yet, a big trick with this car, because it's front wheel drive, because it's heavy, you're not exiting the corner like an Evo, like a Miata, or something that actually has, you know, corner exit grip. You're not. You can't fly out of the corners. So where I make up pretty much all of my time in this car is in the brakes, is always in the brakes. Braking later than the guy in front of me. And if you can brake late enough where you catch him through the corner, he's either going to need to let you pass, or you're just going to hopefully stay on him until the next braking zone. And that's been very, very successful for me. Dive bombing on the brake zone, brake late, it works. And with the big brakes, it works even better. So yeah, brake setup on this car, honestly, if I could have the whole car stock and do one mod, I'd put the brakes on it, because it's insane how much better it is. And that's not to say the OEM stuff is bad. It isn't. The OEM stuff, like I said, is actually very, very robust on these cars. It's a pretty big setup, and for majority of the world, it's more than enough.